It's no doubt been a major year for the country's apex court. Not only did Constitutional Court Chief Justice Mogoeng bow out this year, but the court also had to pronounce on yet another landmark ruling against former President Jacob Zuma. Today, we're due a closer look at our judiciary with an update from Mogoeng's acting replacement, Raymond Zondo, his name and three others currently being considered by the president to see who'll permanently head up the highest court in the land. We've roped in Judges Matter researcher Mbekezeli Benjamin to consider all of this. He joins us live now. Mbekezeli, thank you so much for your time. A busy year for our courts. Let's start with the apex court. Which big cases stick out for you this year?
Good morning, Tafuma, and good morning to the viewers. I think you're quite correct to say it's been a very busy year for the judiciary, and particularly the Constitutional Court. You'll remember at the beginning of this year, they had to consider the case involving former President Zuma, and they sentenced him to 15 months imprisonment. But there was also the case of the elections, whether or not they will be going ahead. The Constitutional Court had to step in and decide, and eventually they decided that the elections must be held by 1 November. So it's been a really busy year, and it's going to be interesting to see from today's presentation how many of the cases that the Constitutional Court was able to finalize, and at all other courts on whether they were able to finalize all of their cases. So basically today we'll be finding out the health of the judiciary.
Like you say, we're only finding out later today. They'll set out the targets and whether they met them. Are you expecting a good scorecard, though?
Well, we still are in the grip of a pandemic, and that has had an impact on the operations of the courts. So the performance of the courts we know right now that they have not been performing as well as they should. There are huge backlogs across the different courts. So we'll be expecting to hear an update on that and how far they are working towards clearing that backlog, and what kind of adaptation measures the judiciary has put in place to deal with cases as we continue to live with the pandemic.
Are there any matters in particular you're hoping to hear addressed by Raymond Zondo today?
Yes, there are a number of matters that we're hoping that the acting Chief Justice will address. The first one is on the court performance, but secondly, we want to know how many cases against judges or complaints against judges have been filed and how many have been finalized. We know that it's a huge problem, the issue of accountability of judges. The judiciary and the JNC in particular has not been as transparent as it should on this issue, so we're hoping to hear an update on that. But also, I think we're hoping to hear how the judiciary as a whole is doing, because it's one of those institutions which is often in the background, and we hardly ever see what goes on back there. So we're hoping to hear from that as well.
Today's report is going to be given to us by Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. We are still awaiting a permanent successor for Mogoeng. Is Zondo's appointment as Chief Justice a near certainty, or is there quite a race between him and the other three candidates? What do you think?
Well, I think he does have an advantage over the other candidates in the sense that he's currently in the position, so he knows the ropes already. But it's very far from being a foregone conclusion that he will be Chief Justice. He is competing against very strong candidates, some of whom have a huge track record. If we think of Judge President Mlambo, who runs the Gauteng courts, Justice Maya, who runs the Supreme Court of Appeal, and even Justice Madlanga, who's also at the Constitutional Court. All of those are very strong candidates, and so Justice Zondo is in for a tough competition.
Acting Chief Justice Zondo will be up against three other candidates. They're going to be interviewed in February. But the manner of the JSC's interviews has been in the spotlight recently. How can they make sure that the process does what it's intended for, which is selecting the right candidate and not become overly combative and highly politicized?
Well, we think one major flaw in the JSC interview process is that it really does not have a set of criteria that they use to guide their operations. So, for example, sitting here, I can't tell you what kind of qualities does a person need for them to be a judge, particularly the Chief Justice position. So we hope that the first thing that the JSC will do is to come up with a set of criteria, which will include qualities such as leadership, management experience, a proven track record of writing impactful judgment, and a general ability to lead the judiciary. So bring all the judges together towards one collective vision. So that's the kind of criteria that we would hope the JSC would put forward before February, before the interviews start. They must have a clear idea of what they're looking for, because that will also guide the kind of questions that are asked and the kind of issues that are interrogated from each candidate.
All right, Mbekezeli, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Judges Matter researcher Mbekezeli Benjamin joining us this morning.